One thing I wanted to pick up, you mentioned innovation, and Heather, I'm trying to connect the dots, but you talked about disruptive technology and how boards and HR committees need to be thinking about that and the impact on talent. What are some specific things you think and I'm coming from the HR committee, or perhaps at the board, what sort of things should the discussion be? How do you get this onto the agenda? How important is it to get on there? Because I must say, many talk about innovation, not sure how to really get their hands around it. And Heather, when you talk artificial robotics, often it feels like a science fiction. And yeah, that's great. That's 10 years, 20 years down the road. We don't need to take any action. What have you seen to elevate it, both at the TD and generally?
So, a tangible example of what the HR committee can look at is how outside in focused are the executive, and so to be more specific, do they really understand what's happening outside? Who are their biggest competitors? Who are the other leaders in the business from an executive, product and customer perspective, that they need to know what they're doing, what's happening from a regulatory perspective, what's happening from a technology disruption perspective. And really what often happens is you become so entrenched in the quarterly results, the business plan that you've set, is that many of your leaders really aren't in touch with the outside market and bringing that insight in. And that trickles all the way down into an organization as a very simple thing that boards can seek to understand is when they're being brought presentations to the board, whether it's to your governance committee, whether it's to the HR committee, are those leaders articulating an understanding of what's happening outside your organization? Not to copy the competition, but to have insights into how you might do it differently and how you might innovate against those things.
I'm going to switch gears a bit to the measurement. So you mentioned, I think several times, measurement, and I know our audience is always looking for, from a perspective of the board and human resource committee, is what sort of measurements should they be watching? What are the key things, key indicators they should be looking at? Maybe from your experience, some of the recommendations you would have on measurements.
Yeah, for sure. Well, one would certainly be the measuring the health of those succession plans. So we have put in place data and metrics to be able to evidence that. That also is helpful to really put into sharp focus where perhaps some of those plans aren't as deep or as fully formed as they need to be. And again, that then focuses the right level of attention on and the tracking necessary to make sure that we close those gaps. We measure promotion rates of our talent. Where are we drawing talent from? We look at the proportion of internal versus external talent acquisition and promotions, and we pay, as we were saying before, close attention. We measure, the diversity across all of our talent practices and programs. So again, who are being promoted, at what kind of rates? Is it representative of that strata of the population? So there are actually quite a few data points that we can point to say, how are we doing on the talent agenda?
Heather, I don't know if any.
So the only thing I would add is I do believe in the future that HR has such rich data around the people that represent the business and really are the business in many cases, that there's so many things happening around analytics that can actually help you predict the future, whether it's retention, whether it's where you have workforce risk, where you have performance risk in the business. And so I think the shift and the emphasis on predicting outcomes based on the rich HR data in the future is where it's going to go, and what I would predict is going to happen in the future. And that's what boards are going to want to seek to understand.
Ken?
I guess my question is for Sue or Heather. I am curious into this question. Do you monitor your ability to retain your young female sort of fast risers through their parenthood period? And I'm thinking, I've sort of seen articles and read companies like Google who have these sort of you know, on workplace daycares and all that sort of. Is that something you think about, and do you monitor it? Is it something that you try and do?
Yes, it is, Ken. Absolutely, we do monitor that. And again, over the past few years, it's been really pleasing as we've put a lot of focus on. Really, what we found, one of the keys to increasing the retention and bringing women back to the work very much more quickly was to keep them as engaged as they wanted to be during the period they took for their maternity leave. Now, it's not the same for everybody. Some of our females say, no, I want to spend the focused time, this is precious time, I don't want to have that interaction, I'll pick up with you in 6 months or a year or whatever it might be. In other cases, they actually want to keep connected, and of course now, the benefits of technology in the social ages, it's much easier to do that. We basically as well guarantee a female her actual job back. So we cover that in a variety of ways by seconding somebody, so that again, that's never an issue.
You think of this idea as actually having on workplace daycare?
We don't have them on workplace. We have a joint venture where we make those facilities available via a professional childcare company. Right. We don't think we're in the childcare business per se, right, but we certainly make that facility available.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk a bit about risk and people risk. I mean, there's a lot of talk about the board and enterprise risk, and focusing on reputational risk, strategic risk. When I look behind it, a lot of those come back to people risks ultimately. So the question, some of the best practices you've seen about, how do the people risks play into perhaps a broader risk discussion at the board, and what are some of the better practices we've seen on that? I certainly see on the top 10, people will be up there as one line item, but how much behind it does the board or the Human Resource Committee need to get into the people risk question? Maybe Heather, I'll start with you, and Sue and Paul, you weighed in. And
sure. I would say there's a couple things that we're seeing organizations and boards pay attention to, and there's a lot being written around culture and the connection to HR risks related to culture. And so, boards really need to understand the health of the leadership pipeline. They need to understand more than once a year how engaged is the workforce, where they have risks in the business, and more importantly, what is the sort of the stated purpose of an organization. And the culture you're trying to create, and is that clear, and are the executives that you're being exposed to clear about what that is? What is the frame of reference that you can operate within, and what are the boundaries, and really tone at the top and holding leaders accountable. And it's interesting, and I'll tell a quick story about a director that told the story about a matter that came to the HR committee of the board around a reputational risk that they had, and the response that they had was to put in more controls and more process. And what was interesting about that is 2 years later they had the same issue, because they had not dealt with the leadership expectations, the culture, the tone at the top, and what's really the purpose of the organization, and what are they trying to achieve for both their customers, their shareholders, and the employees.
So, Sue, anything to add? I've got whispering in my ear about getting out to my to the audience. So, any quick thoughts on their best practices?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with Heather more. I mean, culture is huge. We define culture as what happens when nobody's looking, and you need the right things to be happening. So tone at the top. We take our culture very seriously. We do measure employee engagement very rigorously. I think that is going to be an evolving area where we can do much more quick checks throughout the year, but there's a very robust kind of feedback and action planning around that to again give us some really rich data around potentially where there could be some red flags to look into. So yeah, it's definitely an area that's continuing to develop.